The average American farmer is 58 years old, $1.3 million in debt, and still waking up at 4:30 every morning to tend fields that now barely turn a profit. 1,000 acres, 4 generations, 0 buyers. That's what's left of America's farm belt, because China just walked away, and Brazil changed the rules. But in April 2025, some of them did something they've never done before. They went to Washington, not with pitchforks or policy memos, but with desperation. On March 22, 2025, a coalition of over 400 U.S. farmers submitted a signed petition to the White House, urging President Trump to halt escalating tariffs on Chinese goods. Among them was Iowa soybean farmer Caleb Ragland, who warned in an open letter, "We are not political pawns, we are economic casualties." The urgency wasn't symbolic. According to the USDA's February 2025 farm income forecast, U.S. net farm income is projected to rise just 1.7% this year, showing a dying or stagnating industry. The American Farm Bureau Federation now estimates that more than 32% of family farms are in loan forbearance or default, particularly those exposed to Asian export markets. These farmers aren't simply protesting policy, they're watching lifetimes of equity erode as global buyers vanish. But their calls are meeting a harsher truth. China may no longer need them. Since 2018, U.S. tariffs on Chinese steel, solar panels, and technology components triggered immediate retaliation, most notably on agricultural goods. By 2024, cumulative retaliatory tariffs affected over $24 billion in U.S. ag exports, with China slashing soybean purchases by over 60%. According to Bloomberg Agriculture, inflation only accelerated the crisis. In 2023 to 2024, fertilizer prices jumped 28.4%, diesel rose 41.2%, and equipment maintenance costs surged due to persistent supply chain disruptions, according to Rabobank's Agri-Finance Outlook. Purdue University's latest Ag Economy Barometer reveals that 74% of surveyed farmers cite input inflation as their biggest profitability threat, more than tariffs or weather combined. And while input costs soared, export volume plummeted. The resulting squeeze has turned America's once dominant agricultural economy into what the Journal of Commerce now calls a subsidy-dependent export liability. But even worse, foreign buyers have found new, cheaper suppliers. Global soybean demand hit a record 388.4 million metric tons in 2024, according to the International Grains Council. But U.S. farmers didn't benefit. Instead, benchmark soybean prices on the CBOT fell from $14.35 per bushel in March 2023 to $10.12 by April 2025. The paradox? China's demand for soy is still strong. Its domestic consumption rose 5.6% in 2024. But the U.S. is no longer its preferred source. In a stunning shift, China signed long-term soybean contracts with Brazil, shifting nearly $30 billion in annual trade away from the U.S. over 4 years, per the South China Morning Post. As a result, American farmers are facing surpluses they can't sell and storage costs they can't afford. Grain silos are full, but there's no market to clear them. As one Illinois farmer told Reuters, "We're not feeding the world anymore. We're feeding the void." And that void is growing as Brazil tightens its grip on China's ag supply chain. In just 6 years, Brazil expanded its soybean acreage by more than 17 million hectares, aided by generous state subsidies and $15 billion in Chinese infrastructure investments, including port upgrades and dedicated rail lines like the Ferrogrão Corridor. According to Brazil's Ministry of Agriculture, 73% of China's soybean imports now come from Brazil, up from 53% in 2019. The U.S. share, down to 13%. Its lowest since 2004. What made Brazil so attractive wasn't just price, it was reliability. While Washington imposed tariffs, Brazil offered multi-year contracts indexed in yuan and guaranteed uninterrupted delivery. Chinese ag importers, facing unpredictability from U.S. political cycles, opted for long-term certainty. China doesn't like volatility, said Kevin McNew, chief economist at Farmers Business Network. And U.S. ag has become politically radioactive. But Brazil wasn't acting alone. It was operating within a larger bloc reshaping food geopolitics. BRICS has transitioned from a loose economic acronym to a coordinated trade bloc. In August 2024, the BRICS Plus Food Sovereignty Pact was signed, aiming to increase intra-bloc agricultural trade by 50% within 5 years. Already, BRICS nations now conduct over $42 billion annually in food trade using local currencies, bypassing US dollar pricing and Western commodity exchanges, per the IMF's January 2025 outlook. China and Russia are aggressively funding agricultural infrastructure in member states. Brazil received $9.7 billion in ag-tech investment from BRICS partners last year alone. Meanwhile, India has boosted wheat and rice exports to fellow BRICS nations by the 38% year-over-year, cutting into traditional U.S. markets in Southeast Asia. It's not about blocking America, said Dr. Sun Xiaoming of Renmin University's Trade Institute. It's about building immunity from American leverage. But the implication is clear. As BRICS weaves a tighter economic web, U.S. farmers are being systematically rerouted, and they're not on the new map. For over a century, global grain markets price their futures in Chicago. But by the first quarter of 2025, over $295 billion in agricultural contracts, nearly 42% of all global grain trade, was cleared through non-U.S. exchanges, according to data from the International Commodity Clearinghouse. China's Pan-Asia Agricultural Exchange, launched in 2023, just surpassed $4.1 billion in quarterly soy and corn trade volume, all settled in yuan or digital renminbi. Meanwhile, São Paulo's agro-trade platform, backed by BRICS, is processing grain swaps directly in rupees and reais, bypassing both the dollar and U.S. regulated benchmarks like CBOT. The trend isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. Pricing power means leverage, says HSBC senior analyst Mayra Liu. And if the U.S. loses pricing authority, it loses the ability to stabilize or steer global food security. This isn't a commodity shift, it's an erosion of institutional control. And it's happening faster than Washington expected. In 2024, Russia became the world's largest wheat exporter, moving 62 million metric tons, or 23.5% of global trade, according to the UN's FAO. That number exceeds US, Canadian, and Australian exports combined. But volume only tells part of the story. Moscow's strategy is based on bilateral deals. Ruble-priced wheat for energy discounts or port access. Countries like Egypt, Algeria, and Bangladesh now source over 70% of their wheat from Russia, locking in multi-year supply under politically aligned terms. As Bloomberg reported in February 2025, Russia's State Grain Corporation now guarantees price and delivery certainty, even amid geopolitical turbulence. Contrast that with the U.S., where contract volatility, tariff retaliation, and political brinkmanship have made long-term deals less appealing. Russia is doing what the U.S. used to, tying food to diplomacy, says Dr. David Laborde, senior economist at the International Food Policy Research Institute. And it's working. Washington's former breadbasket has become less central to the world's table. Let's test the hypothesis. Tariffs vanish overnight. Does U.S. agriculture bounce back? According to the American Farm Bureau's March 2025 report, the answer is unlikely. Production costs remain structurally higher than competitors. Brazil's average cost per acre for soybeans is 22% lower than in the Midwest, due to cheaper labor, fertilizer, and logistics. China, even if it reopens, has already secured decade-long contracts with Brazil and Argentina, locking in supply through 2033, as confirmed by China's Ministry of Commerce. Meanwhile, U.S. farm debt has climbed to $561 billion, the highest in 40 years, with delinquency rates nearing 6.3% according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Worse, the next generation isn't taking over. The USDA projects a 20% decline in new farm entrants by 2028, citing capital costs and uncertain export markets. So even with tariff relief, the structural barriers, costs, contracts, demographics don't just remain, they deepen. This isn't a theoretical concern, it's a measurable shift. In 2000, the U.S. held 22% of global agricultural exports. As of February 2025, that share is under 9% per WTO data. Nations once reliant on American grain, Indonesia, Egypt, Thailand, now split their imports across BRICS, EU, and domestic vertical farming initiatives. China's Agri-Independence 2030 strategy aims to reduce food imports by 45% in 5 years, and it's already built 1,100 new greenhouses across 7 provinces in 2024 alone, per the South China Morning Post. Meanwhile, the Middle East is pivoting. Saudi Arabia's NEOM project now includes a $4.3 billion vertical wheat farm, set to produce 90,000 tons annually by 2026. The U.S. is still a biotech powerhouse, but that doesn't translate to dominance in output or reliability. Agriculture is no longer about abundance, says Goldman Sachs agritech strategist Brian Kim. It's about sovereignty and strategy, and America no longer controls either. The rest of the world hasn't just moved on, it's building a future where the U.S. isn't needed at all. So yes, U.S. farmers are begging Trump to end the trade war. But trade was only the surface. Beneath it, a system already in collapse. The subsidies can't cover the losses, the buyers aren't coming back, and the markets have shifted physically, financially, and diplomatically. But there's one more turn in this story, because while American farmers are losing ground, some of America's largest food corporations are making record profits. Why? Because they're quietly moving their operations offshore, investing in foreign farms, and lobbying for deregulated global sourcing. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.